What if I told you the President of the United States is about to do something that hasn't happened in over 30 years? Something so controversial, it could change the balance of power between your state government and Washington forever? Right now, as you watch this, federal troops could be preparing to occupy an American city, not in a war zone, not during a natural disaster, but to enforce immigration policy. And the city fighting back? Minneapolis, Minnesota. Stay until the end, because what's really happening here will shock you, and it might be coming to your city next. Here's what you need to understand. Just hours ago, President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy active-duty military forces into Minneapolis. Not the National Guard, not local police, the actual United States military. On American streets, against American protesters. Why? Because Minnesota's Democratic governor, Tim Walz, refused to back down from his opposition to Trump's aggressive immigration enforcement operations. This isn't just about immigration anymore. This is about whether a president can override your governor, ignore your state's laws, and send soldiers into your neighborhood. And it's happening right now. So how did we get here? Let's rewind the clock. 1 week ago, Minneapolis was already on edge. January 8, 2026, a 37-year-old woman named Renee Good was killed. Not by a criminal, not in a gang shooting. She was killed by an ICE agent during an immigration enforcement operation. Here's the thing that made this explode. Renee Good was a United States citizen. She wasn't undocumented. She wasn't even the target. She was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time when federal immigration agents opened fire. Her death sparked immediate protests across Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. The Trump administration didn't pull back. They doubled down. Nearly 3,000 federal immigration agents were deployed to the Minneapolis area, one of the largest ICE operations in American history. The stated goal was to arrest undocumented immigrants and enforce deportation orders. But then, just yesterday, it happened again. Another ICE shooting. This time, a Venezuelan man was shot in the leg during what officials called a routine traffic stop. He survived, but the city erupted. Thousands of protesters flooded the streets, and that's when things got violent. Federal agents in tactical gear faced off against protesters throwing fireworks and rocks. The agents responded with tear gas, pepper balls, and flashbang grenades. Videos circulated on social media showing scenes that looked more like a war zone than an American city. Governor Tim Walz called the federal operations unacceptable and demanded they cease immediately. He accused the Trump administration of operating without coordination with state and local law enforcement, creating chaos and endangering citizens. Trump's response? He went on Truth Social and threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act if Minnesota didn't restore order and cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. That brings us to today. Right now. This moment. But here's what's crazy. The Insurrection Act is a law from 1807 that gives the president nearly unlimited power to deploy military forces inside the United States. It's been used sparingly throughout history, during the Civil War, during the Civil Rights Movement to enforce desegregation, and most recently during the 1992 LA riots after the Rodney King verdict. It hasn't been invoked in over 30 years. If Trump does this, he would be the first president in modern history to use military force against protesters in a political standoff with a state governor. Think about that. Military troops. On American soil. Against American citizens. Because a governor disagreed with federal policy. Now let's dive into the 5 things you absolutely need to understand about what's happening. Number 1. The constitutional crisis. When the Insurrection Act is invoked, the president can override the Posse Comitatus Act, which normally prevents the military from acting as domestic law enforcement. Your state governor loses authority. Your local police answer to federal commanders. The military operates under different rules of engagement than civilian police. We're talking about soldiers trained for combat zones potentially confronting protesters, immigrants, and civilians on American streets. Legal experts are already warning this could set a precedent that fundamentally alters the balance of power between federal and state governments. Number 2. The political implications. This isn't happening in a vacuum. We're in an election year. The 2026 midterms are 10 months away. Some analysts believe Trump is using this crisis to energize his base around immigration and law and order messaging. Others argue he's testing how far he can push executive power before facing electoral consequences. Minnesota is a purple state, a battleground. Tim Walz is seen as a potential 2028 presidential candidate. This showdown could define both men's political futures. And here's the kicker. Multiple federal prosecutors in Minnesota have already resigned in protest of the administration's tactics. That's unprecedented. Career Justice Department officials walking away because they believe what's happening crosses a legal and moral line. Number 3. The immigration enforcement reality. Let's talk numbers. The Trump administration has deployed nearly 3,000 ICE agents to the Twin Cities. That's more federal agents than were sent to the southern border during some of the largest migrant surges in recent history. The administration claims they're targeting dangerous criminals and gang members. But data from immigration advocacy groups shows that many of those detained have no criminal records beyond immigration violations. Families are being separated. U.S. citizens like Renee Good are caught in the crossfire. Churches and community centers have declared themselves sanctuaries. We're seeing tactics that critics compare to military raids in foreign countries, now happening in American neighborhoods. Number 4. The violence and escalation. 2 shootings by federal agents in 1 week. 1 death. Protesters injured by crowd control weapons. Social media is flooded with footage that's been viewed tens of millions of times. Some videos show federal agents in unmarked vehicles detaining people without identifying themselves. Others show protesters hurling objects at law enforcement. It's becoming impossible to separate justified enforcement from excessive force, legitimate protest from violent chaos. Both sides are dug in. The rhetoric is escalating. And now Trump is threatening to bring in the military, which would pour gasoline on an already raging fire. But here's what's crazy. Number 5. The precedent this sets for the future. If Trump successfully invokes the Insurrection Act here, what stops the next president from doing the same thing in a different city over a different issue? Imagine a Democratic president using it to enforce gun control laws in Texas, or a Republican using it to shut down protests in California. Once this door is opened, it's nearly impossible to close. We're not just talking about this situation in Minneapolis. We're talking about whether any president can unilaterally decide that a state isn't governing correctly and send in federal troops. That's not how American federalism is supposed to work. That's not the system the founders designed. And legal scholars across the political spectrum are raising alarm bells. A Venezuelan man is wounded for the same reason. Thousands of protesters are in the streets. 3,000 federal agents are occupying an American city, and the President of the United States is threatening to send in the military. This isn't normal. This isn't how things are supposed to work. And whether you support Trump's immigration policies or oppose them, you should be very, very concerned about the precedent being set right here, right now. So let me leave you with this. If the Insurrection Act is invoked, we will look back on today as a turning point in American history. The moment when the president claimed the power to occupy American cities with military force over a policy disagreement with a state governor. Is that the America you want to live in? Is that the power you trust any president to have? Because once this line is crossed, there's no going back. Comment below which side you're on. Do you support Trump's use of the Insurrection Act to enforce immigration policy? Or do you believe this is unconstitutional overreach? And here's the real question. Would you feel the same way if a president from the opposite political party did the exact same thing? This story is developing by the hour. Watch my next video where I'll break down the exact legal arguments Minnesota will use if this goes to the Supreme Court, and why constitutional experts say this could be the most important case in 50 years.